So what is going on, guys? I'm Black Ops Amazing. Welcome back to another video on the channel where today we're going to be talking about Treyarch's next game in line, which we know is coming out in 2024. And this is a little bit weird because we have gotten a little bit of leaked information about this game. Not too much, but considering we aren't getting a COD next year, this year's is Infinity Ward's and Treyarch's will be coming out in 2024. So to get information about a game that is so long away yet is really weird, but it seems like this will be happening more often because of how Activision have changed things. I personally don't know the ins and outs, so I couldn't begin to tell you why this is the case really. But the main point of this video, besides from the few leaks that we do have, is I wanted to give my thoughts on what I think Treyarch's next game, specifically zombies, but the game as a whole, campaign and multiplayer, what I think Treyarch should do for the zombies mode in their next game. And this obviously revolves around a ton of different stuff, such as the setting that it's going to be taking place in, the amount of time they get, because there are rumours that they will be working on something for Infinity Ward's game this year. We know they also made the zombies mode for Vanguard, which is Sledgehammer's game. So there's a ton of different variables, but considering the game has been delayed, we can assume that they'll get the full 3 years or so to work on this game like they used to, meaning maybe zombies could return back to the good times, because well, let's not talk about Vanguard. But anyway, getting straight into it, I've written a list down of everything I want to see in COD 2024. From the few leaks that we do have, we know that the game will be taking place in the 90s/2000s, probably more the mid to late 90s. We don't specifically know what wars from that era it's going to be revolving around. It could be a few, it could be one, but this does line up with what we know, because if we take a look at the Forsaken ending, well, that happened in 1985. At the end of that cutscene, we saw it said 5 years later. I think it's pretty obvious that COD 2024 is going to be a sequel to Cold War. So for the zombies mode, it's going to be taking place at least 5 years later. That could also be the case for the campaign, 5 or more years after that happened, because Cold War pretty much was a reboot of the franchise, similar to Modern Warfare, and we're also getting a Modern Warfare 2. So yeah, I doubt though it'll be called Cold War 2 just because of the date. It wouldn't really make sense if the game ended up taking place in the 90s or the early 2000s. So if Forsaken took place in 1985, and we know what happened in the Forsaken ending cutscene took place 5 years after that, that definitely confirms that our next zombies mode will be taking place at least in 1980, but it could be any time in the 90s, maybe even the early 2000s, which for me straight away is good because that isn't really a time frame we've seen in zombies before. If we go back to the old days, specifically from Black Ops 1 to BO3 or 4, because we had time travel, we had so many different maps that took place in so many different settings. The best example I would say was Call of the Dead, because that took place in 2011 if I remember correctly, which at the time was present day. So the time setting for when zombies maps in COD 2024 are going to take place all just depends on when the actual game takes place. As we saw in Cold War, if the campaign takes place in the 80s, so does zombies. It's the same with Vanguard. So with COD 2024 taking place in the 90s and maybe the 2000s, that's more than likely because unlike past games, we aren't traveling through space and time. The zombies maps will also take place in that era, which, like I said, I'm quite happy about because it isn't really a setting we've seen for zombies before, let alone a COD game. There is one thing I've written down on this list, which is I want Treyarch's next zombies to take absolutely nothing from Vanguard zombies. Everything that they've done in this game, do not take any ideas from it. I think my perfect matchup would be a mixture of BO3/Cold War zombies. So take a bunch of ideas from both of those games, put them together, and I think that could make one of the best zombies games we've ever had. As to what parts of these different games I would take and make into one, well, the first thing and the main thing for me is there has to be a set cast of characters. Two of the major problems with Cold War and Vanguard zombies, which if you aren't too bothered about the story, maybe this doesn't bother you, but if you are interested in the zombie storyline like I am, then this is a massive issue. It's extremely difficult to get attached to, well, whoever you're playing as. It's very difficult to care about them, care about their actions, anything they do, anything they say, whether they die or not. That's really the main thing for any storyline, to be honest. If you think of any campaign game, who you're playing as is extremely important. Even if the story's crap, you can still fall in love with the character and end up enjoying a game just for that reason. I don't know, ever since operators were introduced into zombies, it just took a little bit of, I guess, life out of the game mode. It felt like something was missing, going from characters such as Primus, Ultimus, the Mob of the Dead crew. We've had some amazing cast of characters over the years, the Shadows of Evil crew, the Call of the Dead ones. Some of the quotes we've had are hilarious. One of the things I've always loved is seeing the connection between characters. You would see their relationship grow as we progressed from map to map. And well, if you don't have that and you've just got operators, there's no connection between characters. And another thing is you can also tell a storyline through a character. Half of the Ether storyline that we had from World at War 2 Black Ops 4 was told through quotes said by characters. Again, because we've got operators, that can't happen now, making me feel less involved in the story. So yeah, for me, that's number one. It's extremely important for the story and just from an entertainment point of view. I've also written down, which I just kind of talked about, was the next game must have intro and outro cutscenes for each map. We had an intro and outro cutscene for D Machine. The intro was great, the outro, okay, maybe it wasn't an outro as such. And then for the other Cold War maps, we had outro cutscenes, but no intros, whereas we were used to before that getting both an intro and an outro for each map, which really helps to tell the story. Also, just in general, I'd love to see a lot more side Easter eggs in Zombies. I feel like, again, in Cold War and Vanguard especially, I don't really want to mention that game because it's in a league of its own, but even in Cold War, there weren't as many side Easter eggs as compared to BO4 or 3. There was in the first map, D Machine, but then after that, I don't know, I felt like there weren't as many. I don't think you can ever really complain that there are too many Easter eggs. It's just something for people to do, so I'd love to see a lot more of them. Next up, again, another big one, which for me is probably on the level of a set cast of characters, are the maps. I would personally love to see more unique maps return to Zombies, because a lot of what we saw in Cold War, a lot of the maps that we had were based around the campaign. And what I mean by that is, well, if we look at BO3 for example, or BO4, we had so many interesting and unique locations such as Dreisendrache Castle in Austria, or Gorod-Korovi, Stalingrad, Revelations, Zetsubonoshima, Shadows of Evil, and you compare those unique locations to the ones that we had in Cold War, which were all kind of the same in feeling. Most are actually all of the maps that we have in Vanguard or Cold War revolved around the campaign, whereas BO3's didn't. The castle in Dreisendrache, Morgue City, Zetsubonoshima, Revelations was so much more unique in terms of location, and this also comes into aesthetics as well. I do think the maps that we've had in more recent times look a lot more bland. They just don't look as visually pleasing. So yeah, maybe that also does come down to the fact that we don't have time travel in more recent times. If that does return and our characters can go to different eras, then maybe this could set up better locations. But still, I think there's a lot more that Treyarch could have done with maps and how they looked and where they took place. And then a few more things, but controversial. I'm not even too sure what I would do with this, but the first one being, should loadouts be in Zombies still, or should we return to how it used to be? Because there are advantages to loadouts, a few being you can have the best weapon in the game from the get-go. It means you're a lot more powerful on round one than you used to be. You don't have to mess about with the mystery box, but at the same time, this also does take away from what Zombies is, and some things that did make it kind of interesting and unique, such as I just mentioned, loadouts pretty much make the mystery box redundant now unless you want the wonder weapon. I don't really have any other reason to spin the mystery box, since from round one I can now have the gun that I want, so it makes the mystery box irrelevant. It also makes war weapons irrelevant as well, two things that were a major part of Zombies. Loadouts also take away that idea of building yourself up from round one where you were pretty weak and then having to save your points to spin the mystery box to get the weapon you wanted. There's not really any need from that point of view. Yes, there are still perks that you have to buy and you still have to pack a punch your weapons and upgrade them, but there are a lot of things that having loadouts take away. So I am kind of mixed on that. I like the idea, I liked it when I first heard about it, but I do sometimes when I'm playing Cold War think there's just something missing that I liked about the original Zombies, such as having to use the mystery box and buying weapons off the wall and being weak on round one. Obviously, you can still do it if you want to. You can pick your starting weapon to be something terrible, but if you have the option to have the weapon you want, then of course you're going to take that option. You're not going to make it more difficult for yourself. So that's something I'm mixed about. I think at the end of the day, I'd probably still keep loadouts. One thing I would keep from Cold War was the perk system. I quite liked having to upgrade my perks. Forget everything that you did with perks in Vanguard and just go back to what we saw in Cold War. But then on the other hand, I have thought sometimes, and this comes into play with this, would I also get rid of salvage from Zombies? Because whilst yes, it is what we use to buy, for example, armor, kill streaks, it also occasionally makes me feel like Zombies has just become a little bit too much like multiplayer. Could Treyarch possibly find a way to get rid of salvage, but also allow us to purchase kill streaks still, and armor if that's going to continue to be in the game? I think so, yes. They could just get rid of salvage and instead just make it so we have to use points to get their stuff. And talking about points, something that I see an awful lot in the comment section of Twitter or YouTube is people for asking for Zombies to return to the old point system. Personally, I've kind of got used to what we have now. This isn't something that bothers me. I had no problem with the old point system either. It did add more of a challenge. The main one being, depending on where you shot the zombie, would depend on the amount of points you got. You would have to think about knifing and shooting, especially in those early rounds. The new point system does feel a little bit slower, but yeah, that one isn't an issue for me. And the final one I thought of was armor. does armor make zombies too easy? There's no doubt that zombies nowadays, Cold War and Vanguard, is a lot easier than what it used to be. BO4, 3, 2, 1, World at War. Zombies was a lot harder simply because you had less health. I've always said I'm not the best zombies player, so hey, if I can get more hits, I'll take it. But I can't argue that Cold War and Vanguard is a hell of a lot easier, and I know for some people, if something's too easy, which Cold War was, I think Vanguard's a little bit more difficult, that in turn can also get a bit boring. Should they keep the armor system, or should they revert back to the old health system where you get 3 hits, and then if you buy Juggernog, you get an additional 3. So you have a total of 6. Instead of the, I don't know, 9, 10, 12 hits, whatever it is you can take in the recent games. So there we go, that is my list on what Treyarch have to do for COD 2024 Zombies to make it the ultimate zombies game. Combine a ton of things from Black Ops 3 and Cold War, not everything, and just forget Vanguard entirely, and along with the development time that they are getting, I think we could have one of the best zombies games, potentially. So yeah, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, hopefully you've enjoyed the video. If you have, drop a like rating, make sure you are subscribed to stay up to date with the latest videos on the channel, and I will see you in the next one. Until then, goodbye.